The Mountain Fanatics, the Order of Assassins. They made kings tremble from the shadows. Then the Mongols burned their fortress.
On the evening of October 14th, 1092, near the ancient town of Nahavand along the high-altitude roads of western Persia, a small royal retinue accompanied Nizam al-Mulk, the omnipotent Grand Vizier of the Seljuk Empire, as he was carried in his litter from the audience tent of Sultan Malik Shah I. Out of the shadows emerged a man disguised as a devout Sufi mystic, holding a petition out toward the aging statesman. As Nizam al-Mulk reached to accept the document, the stranger drew a concealed blade, driving it cleanly into the vizier's chest. The assassin, a young operative named Bu Tahir Arani, was instantly cut down by the royal guards, but the political shockwave of the strike was irreversible. Within weeks, Sultan Malik Shah I died under highly mysterious circumstances, and the sprawling, heavily armed Seljuk Empire plunged into a chaotic 12-year civil war among his sons. This singular, calculated strike did not merely eliminate an individual ruler, it announced to the medieval world the arrival of an entirely new form of asymmetric political warfare. Operating from a network of mountain fortresses, a small, resource-constrained religious minority had successfully decapitated the administrative apparatus of the dominant superpower of the Islamic world, demonstrating that targeted execution could neutralize an army of thousands without a single field battle. The historical entity popularly known in the Western world as the Order of Assassins was in reality the state structure of the Nizari Ismailis, an independent branch of Ismaili Shia Islam. Domestically, they referred to their movement as al-Dawa al-Jadida, the new preaching, or simply the Nizari Dawat. Their detractors across the medieval Islamic world frequently labeled them Batiniya, a term highlighting their belief in the esoteric, hidden meanings, batin, of scripture, or pejoratively as hashashiyah, an Arabic term implying social lowliness or erratic behavior, which later entered European languages via the Crusaders as the word assassin. The order emerged definitively in the year 1090 CE, when the charismatic Persian theologian Hasan-i Sabbah seized the formidable mountain fortress of Alamut in the Alborz mountain range of northern Iran. Rather than a traditional contiguous empire, this civilizational entity functioned as a highly decentralized, castle-based religious and military order, operating as an archipelago of sovereign mountain enclaves. At its peak in the 12th century, the Nizari state controlled between 40 and 50 major fortress nodes across two main geographic cores, the Alborz Mountains and the arid region of Khoistan in eastern Persia, alongside a secondary cluster in the Jabal Bara Mountains of western Syria. While their territory did not feature broad, surveyed borders, their zones of absolute tactical control and economic extraction covered thousands of square kilometers of vital mountain corridors, effectively allowing them to project power, dominate trade networks, and influence regional politics from Cairo to Baghdad and from Damascus to the borders of Afghanistan. The rise of the Nizari Ismaili state can only be understood within the hyper-fragmented geopolitical landscape of the late 11th century Middle East. For centuries, the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad had claimed nominal religious authority over the Sunni Islamic world, but by the mid-1050s, real political and military power had been usurped by the Seljuk Turks, a nomadic Central Asian dynasty that built a massive centralized empire stretching from Anatolia to Hindu Kush. Concurrently, the Ismaili Shia Fatimid Caliphate, centered in Cairo, stood as the primary ideological rival to Sunni dominance, controlling Egypt, parts of North Africa, and the Levant. However, by the late 11th century, both the Seljuk and Fatimid structures were buckling under internal strains. The Seljuks imposed a rigid, militarized feudal system known as the Iqta, which sparked intense resentment among local Persian populations, rural peasants, and religious minorities who bore the brunt of heavy taxation and military exactions. Meanwhile, a catastrophic internal succession crisis tore through the Fatimid court in Cairo in 1094 CE, following the death of Caliph al-Mustansir Billah. The powerful military commander and vizier, Al-Afdal Shahanshah, staged a palace coup, bypassing the rightful elder heir, Prince Nizar, in favor of Nizar's younger, more pliable half-brother, al-Mustali. This betrayal fractured the Ismaili world. Hasan-i Sabbah, an exceptionally educated Persian scholar who had studied in Cairo as a Fatimid agent, repudiated the coup, declared his allegiance to the displaced Prince Nizar, and cut ties with the Egyptian regime. Seizing upon the deep anti-Seljuk sentiment in Persia and the ideological vacuum within the Ismaili movement, Hasan-i Sabbah transformed his followers into an independent revolutionary movement, establishing a state without an apparent capital city or flat borderlines, tailored specifically to survive within the cracks of surrounding empires. The collective identity and survival strategy of the Nizari order were deeply forged by their unique religious ideology, environmental constraints, and early regional betrayals. Central to their worldview was the doctrine of talim, or authoritative spiritual instruction. Hasan-i Sabbah argued that human reason alone was insufficient to understand divine truth, necessitating absolute, unquestioning obedience to a divinely guided, living Ismaili imam. When the imam went into hiding following the execution of Prince Nizar in Alexandria around 1095 CE, Hasan-i Sabbah acted as the hujjah, the proof or supreme representative of the hidden imam, commanding total discipline from his adherents. This unyielding theological hierarchy was perfectly complemented by the harsh topography of their selected homeland, the Alborz and Zagros mountain ranges of Iran, characterized by near vertical cliffs, narrow gorges, and freezing winters, dictated their defensive military posture. Rather than fielding conventional armies of cavalry or foot soldiers, which would be easily crushed by the hundreds of thousands of Seljuk warriors, the Nizaris became master architects and hydraulic engineers. They selected inaccessible rock outcrops and engineered extensive networks of rock-cut water cisterns, granaries, and terraced slopes that allowed individual fortresses to withstand multi-year sieges. Surrounded on all sides by hostile Sunni majorities, the Abbasid state apparatus, and regional Seljuk governors who viewed them as dangerous heretics, the early Nizaris developed a siege mentality that valued absolute operational security, camouflage, and tactical deception. They realized that their small, dispersed population could only survive against massive state armies by utilizing asymmetric deterrence, turning their vulnerability into an elite apparatus of targeted intelligence and execution. The rise of the order from a scattered underground sect to an independent territorial power began with an extraordinary, bloodless tactical victory. In the late 1080s, Hasan-i Sabbah identified Alamut Castle, perched atop a sheer ridge 2,100 meters above sea level in the western Alborz, as the ideal strategic command post. Instead of launching a frontal assault, Hasan methodically sent his highly trained da'is, missionaries, into the valleys surrounding the fort to convert the local rural population and the garrison of the castle itself. In September 1090, Hasan secretly entered the castle in disguise. By the time the Seljuk governor, a Shia named Mahdi, realized his entire garrison had converted to Hasan's doctrine, it was too late to resist. Hasan-i Sabbah allowed the governor to leave peacefully, even drawing up a draft of 3,000 gold dinars as compensation for the fort, a sum later fully paid by Nizari agents. The acquisition of Alamut provided the order with a sovereign foundation. Within months, Hasan sent operatives to seize other critical high-altitude strongholds across Persia, most notably in the rugged borderlands of Kohistan, where the local populations welcomed Ismaili rule as a liberation from oppressive Seljuk Turkish rule. The Seljuk state responded quickly with overwhelming force. In 1092, the Seljuk Sultan dispatched major conventional armies to besiege both Alamut in the north and the Nizari strongholds in Kohistan. The Nizari defenders at Alamut, numbering fewer than 100 men and running dangerously low on provisions, managed to hold out through the sheer defensive layout of the castle until local Ismaili sympathizers from the surrounding valleys smuggled in supplies and launched surprise night raids on the Seljuk camps. The sieges collapsed entirely following the dramatic assassination of Nizam al-Mulk later that year, which brought a grinding halt to coordinated imperial campaigns and allowed the Nizaris to expand into the power vacuums of the decade-long Seljuk succession wars. The true breakthrough moment that solidified the Order of Assassins as a permanent geopolitical factor in the medieval world occurred on April 28, 1192, in the coastal city of Tyre in the Levant. By the mid-12th century, the Nizaris had successfully established a secondary branch in the mountains of Syria under the leadership of Rashid al-Din Sinan, famously known to the Western Crusaders as the Old Man of the Mountain. On that spring day, Conrad of Montferrat, the newly elected king of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem, was walking through the streets of Tyre after dining with the local bishop. Two Nizari fida'is, self-sacrificing operatives, who had spent over 6 months disguised as Christian monks to carefully infiltrate Conrad's inner circle, approached the king. Before his royal guard could react, they drew hidden daggers and stabbed Conrad repeatedly, inflicting fatal wounds. The international impact of this strike was immense. It took place at the height of the Third Crusade, a massive global conflict involving the armies of Richard the Lionheart of England and the Ayyubid Sultan Saladin. While historians continue to debate the ultimate mastermind behind the contract, with some medieval sources accusing King Richard or Saladin of covertly hiring the Nizaris, the execution proved that no political figure, Christian or Muslim, Western monarch or Eastern sultan, was beyond the reach of the Order's intelligence network. This event forced both Saladin and the Crusader states to formally recognize the Nizaris as an independent diplomatic entity. It demonstrated that the Order could change the course of international Crusader politics instantly, forcing major empires to negotiate treaties with them, rather than treating them as mere outlaws or local rebels. The historical trajectory of the Nizari Ismaili state can be mapped across several major structural achievements, theological transformations, and ultimate institutional crises. Following the death of Hasan-i Sabbah, after a 34-year reign confined entirely to the interior of Alamut, power smoothly transitioned to his trusted military commander, Kia Buzurg Umid. This peaceful transition dismantled Seljuk expectations that the movement would disintegrate upon its founder's death. Kia Buzurg Umid and his son Muhammad constructed a hereditary administrative system that preserved the state's defensive lines for decades. After multiple failed attempts to plant deep roots in urban centers like Aleppo and Damascus, the Syrian Nizaris successfully captured the impregnable fortress of Masyaf. This acquisition established a permanent territorial base in the west, enabling them to navigate the complex diplomatic waters between Christian Crusader principalities and rising Sunni regimes. On August 8, 1164, the 17th of Ramadan, 559 AH, the fourth Nizari ruler of Alamut, Hasan II, introduced a radical theological shift. Before a massive assembly of followers gathered at the base of the fortress, he proclaimed the Qiyamah, spiritual resurrection. He declared that the outer, literal requirements of Islamic Sharia law were henceforth abolished, revealing the pure spiritual essence of Islam. This created a profound internal transformation, redefining the community from an activist, militant political movement into an intensely esoteric, Gnostic society. Under Rashid al-Din Sinan, the Syrian branch achieved its greatest political and military autonomy. Sinan successfully repelled 2 major sieges by Saladin's massive Ayyubid armies. After a Nizari operative nearly killed Saladin in his own tent in 1176, Saladin signed a non-aggression pact, leaving the Nizari state completely unmolested for the remainder of his rule. In a stunning diplomatic pivot, Grand Master Jalal al-Din Hassan publicly renounced the Qiyamah doctrine and announced a formal return to orthodox Sunni Islamic law. This tactical decision, recognized by the Abbasid Caliph al-Nasir in Baghdad, successfully integrated the Nizari state into the mainstream Islamic international order, securing their castles from regional attacks and buying several decades of peace. The ultimate crisis came from the east. The unstoppable Mongol Empire, led by Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, launched a massive campaign to liquidate all independent Islamic states. Command of an army numbering over 150,000 soldiers allowed the Mongols to bring advanced Chinese-engineered siege engines to the Alborz Mountains. The final Nizari Grand Master, Rukn al-Din Kushar, trapped in the fortress of Maimun-Diz, surrendered in November 1256, hoping to save his people from wholesale slaughter. Hulagu Khan ordered the absolute demolition of Alamut's defensive works and torched its magnificent world-renowned library. By 1273, the Mamluk Sultan Baybars systematically captured the final remaining Syrian castles, ending the sovereign political existence of the medieval Order of Assassins. The Order of Assassins achieved an almost unmatched level of fame and infamy across Afro-Eurasian history due to their highly visible methods of political violence. To medieval Europe and the urban centers of the Middle East, they became the ultimate symbol of hidden terror. Western Crusaders, returning from the Holy Land, brought back sensationalized stories of a mysterious old man of the mountain who held absolute hypnotic control over fanatical young men. This imagery reached its narrative peak in the travelogues of the Venetian merchant Marco Polo, who wrote down detailed accounts in 1298 CE, long after the fall of Alamut. Polo claimed that Hasan-i Sabbah drugged young recruits with hashish and transported them into a hidden garden of earthly delights, filled with wine, milk, honey, and beautiful women. Upon waking, the young men were told that they had experienced a foretaste of paradise and that they could permanently return there only by executing the Grand Master's targets and dying in the service of the order. Modern academic scholarship, led by eminent historians such as Farhad Daftari and Marshall Hodgson, has thoroughly debunked these stories as fabrications. The term Hashashiyya was never used by the Nizaris themselves. It was an insulting term used by their enemies to mock their unorthodox beliefs, which Western observers mistakenly took literally. The fida'is were not drugged, erratic fanatics. They were highly educated, deeply pious, and intensely disciplined operatives who underwent years of rigorous training in languages, theology, martial arts, and disguise to carry out complex operations with minimal collateral damage. Despite these historical corrections, the myth of the drug-fueled killer proved highly durable, permanently embedding the Order's name into modern global languages as the standard word for political assassination, and inspiring countless novels, films, and multi-billion-dollar video game franchises like Assassin's Creed. Beneath the fearsome reputation propagated by foreign chroniclers, the Nizari state maintained an incredibly vibrant internal cultural and intellectual life. The mountain fortresses were not mere military outposts, they were sophisticated islands of learning and science. Hasan-i Sabbah and his successors built a massive library at Alamut that became famous throughout the Islamic world, drawing premier astronomers, mathematicians, and philosophers who fled the devastating nomadic invasions sweeping across the lowlands. The legendary polymath Nasir al-Din al-Tusi spent over 3 decades residing in the Nizari fortresses of Kohistan and Alamut, where he composed his foundational works on ethics, the Nasirian ethics, mathematics, and planetary astronomy. Socially, the Nizari community functioned as an egalitarian religious brotherhood under the absolute spiritual guidance of the Grand Master. Because they were constantly under siege, they did not develop the rigid class divides, opulent palace cultures, or massive wealth gaps that characterized the contemporary Seljuk or Fatimid courts. Their social structure valued absolute discipline, literacy, and community solidarity. Women in the Nizari state, while bound by the patriarchal norms of the medieval era, occasionally occupied notable positions. Historical records mention the high status of the mothers and daughters of the Grand Masters, who actively participated in administrative decisions during periods of succession. In their treatment of subject populations and neighbors, the Nizaris were remarkably pragmatic. The vast majority of the rural peasants living in the valleys below their castles were traditional Sunni Muslims or local Christians. Rather than enforcing mass conversions, the Nizari state protected these communities from chaotic Seljuk tax collectors and military raids in exchange for fixed, predictable agricultural tributes. This created a deep baseline of loyalty among the local peasantry, who regularly warned the castle garrisons of advancing enemy forces. The Order of Assassins was far from an unblemished or heroic state. It was a gritty, highly militarized entity whose survival strategies exacted a terrible human toll. Their reliance on targeted assassination as a tool of statecraft created an atmosphere of pervasive terror across the Middle East. No official, judge, or general could sleep soundly, knowing that an ideological slip could make them a target. This strategy provoked brutal counter-reactions from urban Sunni populations. Following major political assassinations, urban mobs in cities like Isfahan, Baghdad, and Aleppo regularly launched massive pogroms against local Ismaili neighborhoods, slaughtering thousands of innocent citizens suspected of harboring Nizari sympathies. Internally, the state suffered from periodic ideological instability and severe succession crises. The abrupt shift from strict adherence to Islamic law to the total liberation of the Qiyamah in 1164 caused deep psychological fractures within the community. Many traditionalist Ismailis viewed the abolition of Sharia as an act of apostasy, leading to quiet defections and internal resistance. Indeed, Hasan II was himself stabbed to death in 1156 by his own brother-in-law, who condemned his radical theological innovations. The subsequent reversal back to Sunni orthodoxy under Jalal al-Din Hassan in 1210 further confused the population, illustrating how easily the leadership could manipulate core religious doctrines for temporary diplomatic gains. The forces that ultimately broke the order were both internal and external. By the mid-13th century, decades of relative isolation inside their fortresses had bred institutional complacency. When the unstoppable war machine of the Mongol Empire arrived in Persia in 1256, the Nizaris were deeply divided on whether to fight to the end or capitulate. The final Grand Master, Rukn al-Din Khursha, was young, inexperienced, and easily manipulated by Mongol promises of safe passage. His decision to order the surrender of his formidable fortresses dismantled their centuries-old defensive architecture from within. Once the castles were safely opened, the Mongol forces systematically slaughtered the garrisons, systematically executed Khursha himself, and brought a violent end to the Nizari state structure in Persia. The short-term and long-term impacts of the Nizari Ismaili state permanently altered the political, intellectual, and religious geography of the Middle East. Militarily, they revolutionized the concept of asymmetric deterrence, proving that a non-state actor could achieve long-term survival against standard imperial armies by utilizing strategic intelligence and targeted psychological operations. Their methods forced surrounding empires to completely re-engineer their internal security systems, introducing early forms of bodyguards, intelligence-gathering networks, and heavily fortified palaces across the Islamic world and Europe. Intellectually, the Order's deep commitment to preserving books and supporting scientists during a time of widespread nomadic destruction saved vital pieces of Islamic scientific heritage. The works composed by scholars like Nasir al-Din al-Tusi under Nizari patronage later laid the foundation for major breakthroughs in Renaissance European astronomy, as his mathematical models for planetary motion were heavily utilized centuries later by Copernicus. Regionally, the collapse of the Nizari state triggered a massive diaspora of Ismaili communities across Asia. Stripped of their mountain strongholds, the Nizari Ismailis were forced to adapt to a quiet, decentralized underground existence. They adopted the outward appearances of Sufi mystical orders or traditional Twelver Shia communities to avoid persecution, a practice known as taqiyya, precautionary dissimulation. This survival strategy allowed their unique religious traditions, poetry and philosophy, to spread along trade routes into Central Asia, Afghanistan, India, and East Africa, transforming a highly localized mountain state into a resilient global religious community. Today, the medieval order of assassins is remembered through two completely distinct narratives, one highly romanticized in popular culture, and the other meticulously reconstructed by modern academic institutions. In global popular media, the sensationalist myths popularized by Marco Polo and medieval Crusader chronicles remain dominant. The order has been thoroughly commercialized, serving as the central inspiration for iconic books, blockbuster films, and historical fantasy games that portray them as secular, roof-running vigilantes fighting a global war for human free will. In contrast, modern historical scholarship has undergone a major revisionist renaissance. Organizations such as the Institute of Ismailis Studies in London, along with international historians, have translated and analyzed surviving Ismaili texts, effectively dismantling centuries of hostile anti-Ismaili polemics. This research presents the Nizaris not as bloodthirsty killers, but as a highly organized, literate, and deeply principled community that used targeted violence exclusively as a defensive measure to preserve their religious autonomy against overwhelming empires. Furthermore, the physical remnants of their civilization have become critical sites of global cultural heritage. The ruins of Masyaf Castle in Syria and Alamut in Iran have undergone extensive archaeological preservation efforts led by national antiquities departments and the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. Most significantly, the human lineage of the order survives to this very day. The millions of modern Nizari Ismaili Shia Muslims scattered across over 25 countries look to the Aga Khan as their direct, living spiritual leader, tracing his unbroken genealogy straight back to Prince Nizam and the Grand Masters who once ruled the mountain strongholds of Alamut. The epic chronicle of the Order of Assassins ultimately serves as a powerful study in the mechanics of human adaptation and asymmetric power. Their story demonstrates how a small, marginalized community, when confronted with existential destruction by massive conventional empires, can leverage geography, theology, and intelligence to completely rewrite the rules of conflict. They proved that power is not merely a matter of large armies or vast treasuries. It is shaped by organizational discipline, psychological impact, and the control of strategic landscapes. Yet, their history also warns of the profound, tragic realities of asymmetric warfare. A doctrine built entirely on fear inevitably invites devastating counter-violence, trapping both rulers and ordinary citizens in an endless cycle of conflict. By transforming their remote mountain cliffs into world-class centers of philosophy and science, while simultaneously using them as bases for targeted political executions, the Nizaris left behind a deeply complex dual legacy. They showed that human groups possess an astonishing capacity for creative survival in the harshest environments, leaving an indelible mark on history that continues to captivate the global imagination long after their stone fortresses have crumbled into dust.